EA has officially announced that there will be no more development on Need for Speed Unbound, and in the same breath, they've decided that they're going to stop all development on Need for Speed games for the time being. Let's go. All right, I do not have the pleasure of bringing this news to you, but in a statement to Eurogamer today, EA has announced that Criterion games will be moving on to Battlefield. Now, obviously, we knew that the majority of Criterion was already working on Battlefield, but there was a small team called Kaizen that was working on Need for Speed Unbound. They did all of the live service for the last year. They put out 4 amazing updates to the game that really encouraged the fan base to stick around and play the game, and it sort of brought new life into that game and into that franchise. We really thought the woes of Need for Speed were sort of over. I personally thought that the Need for Speed direction was really good, and if they took that momentum into the next Need for Speed game and they just started working on it, I think they would have built a very good game. But now all of that is scratched. It's all off the table because all of the people that were working on that are now working on Battlefield, and there's really no timeline. They could be working on it for 6 months or 9 months or even a year at this point, but we have no idea at this point because no one is sharing anything real specific. But what we do know is that Battlefield is behind. I mean, it has to be. That decision to take everyone from Need for Speed and put them on Battlefield just means you're behind. You don't have enough manpower to get this done this year. And I know they want to release the game in 2025, which is kind of stupid if you ask me. They released the Battlefield Labs thing this morning. If you don't know what that is, you can get in and test Battlefield early to try to give feedback. But the thing is, they said they're in a pre-alpha state. Like, what do you mean you're in a pre-alpha state? So you want to release a full Battlefield game at the end of the year and you guys don't have like the things in place, and yet you're going to bring in fans to sort of test things, and I don't know, it just doesn't add up. What it really adds up to me is that EA is just behind. That's all it is. They can't get everything done in the timeline that they had promised to shareholders. And honestly, they don't really promise timelines to shareholders. What they do promise is profits. And what they're seeing is that 2025 is just not a year for profit. They have to get Battlefield out. So my suspicion is that this year, we're going to see a Battlefield game release. This year, we're going to see another subpar Battlefield. In addition to that, we're going to see the longest break between Need for Speed titles. Unbound released in 2022, and then we've got whatever the Need for Speed is next, releasing in, who knows, 28, 29? I mean, it's definitely not going to be 26, and it's probably not going to be 27, unless EA has Criterion working on this for like 6 or 9 months and then says, okay, it's the end of 25, you've got until 27 to build this game, which is like maybe a year or 2. I mean, that's a really tight development window. It's possible, but the whole Criterion team has to be on it in order for that to be happening. And not only that, I don't even think that's enough time. And honestly, that was the development cycle for Need for Speed Unbound, and it was very rushed. Like, the game didn't feel complete. It felt like they made decisions that were just so in the interest of time. Like, for example, the party size. You could only have 4-player party size instead of 8. It's because they didn't want to rewrite code for the piece of UI that put 8 players on the screen. Like, these are little decisions, but they had huge effects on the gameplay and huge effects on the community. Not only that, but they decided to only have it on the next-gen consoles, which is fine if the game is releasing in this year, but it released in 22. The last gen consoles are still playing Need for Speed Heat and Hot Pursuit Remastered, and they haven't upgraded yet because you had COVID and all these other things happening that prevented people from actually upgrading their consoles. Obviously, that's a different story now, and the next game is probably going to be on current gen consoles only, which is fine, but I feel like this rush development cycle that they have with Need for Speed is just so irritating. And now that it's delayed even more, we are going to get hungry for another Need for Speed game, and they know it, which means they're going to want to put out another Need for Speed game as soon as they possibly can, which is directly after the Battlefield development is done. And honestly, there's probably no telling when we're actually going to get a full studio back on Need for Speed, even though the franchise obviously deserves it. There's a huge fan base for it. It's a huge game. It's a huge title. They need to do this. It's just not happening. It's unfortunate. It's just unfortunate. And the reality that we all need to realize is that Battlefield is a bigger franchise for EA. It means more to the brand and the shareholders. And so Need for Speed is always going to take a back seat to that. Here's my prediction for what's going to happen though. I don't think Need for Speed can go 7 years between titles for an actual release. So EA will probably remake or remaster another game. It's definitely not going to be the one that everybody wants, but it might be something from the past 10 years, and it'll probably be something that a completely different studio does. It's not like building a new game from scratch. It's basically taking an older game and making it current. But if we don't even get that, the question for me personally and the channel is, what is going to fill in the gaps here? We have a huge gap, 22 to 27 at least, maybe 28 or 29. We're looking at 6 to 7 years in between Need for Speed games. And honestly, I like playing racing games, so I want to make more content on other games. And I haven't, because I've been focusing on Motorfest and Need for Speed, and those are the two main pillars of the channel. But I can't even consider Need for Speed a main pillar of the channel anymore, because there is no Need for Speed game for the next, I don't even know, 3-4 years. So this is like not only bad for the community, bad for us, bad for the channel, it's bad for everybody. I mean, this is really frustrating to see this exact same thing happen over and over again, and EA's fine with it. This is what they're deciding to do, and they feel like it's in the best interest of their company to make this decision. And I don't know, I couldn't disagree more. I feel like they need to focus on Need for Speed, but my opinion is maybe a little biased. I love Need for Speed, and I couldn't give two shits about Battlefield. So I don't know. It is what it is, man. This is the news. I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you so much. I'll catch you on the next one. Trigger out.